You can now hear Movie Heaven, Movie Hell on Stitcher. Stitcher is radio on demand. Listen anytime, anywhere. Stitcher is an award-winning free app that lets you listen to all your favourite shows, plus discover from 20,000 news, entertainment and sports shows. You can also create your own custom playlists. Stitcher is available on iOS, Android, Nook, iPad and in over 4 million car dashboards. It's on demand and it's on the go. No downloading, no syncing, no wasted memory. You can stream your favourite podcasts from Stitcher. Don't have Stitcher? Download it free today at Stitcher.com or in the App Store. And please leave us a review and rating on Stitcher. Thank you. Welcome to Movie Heaven, Movie Hell with me, Simon Aitken, and
I'm Keith Eyles, and we are both independent filmmakers as well as lifelong fans of cinema that enjoy talking about other directors' work. And we're currently nearing the end of our first pass of the alphabet.
We are indeed. We're very close to the end. We've only got 2 more shows to go after this one.
And then we reset and start all over again.
So let's crack on. This week's episode is W for the Wachowskis.
Indeed, the Wachowskis, who originally the Wachowski brothers, and then the Wachowski siblings, and now the Wachowskis. So there you go. We're ticking the boxes in so much as we've got our first transgender directors to be covered on this podcast, which is there you go, broad.
Yes. Well, I didn't think we would go straight into that, but I mean, my personal thoughts is does it matter what gender somebody is as a director, just as long as their work is good?
I agree entirely. In fact, part of the reason I said that was just because you know, if you look back at the work or the directors that we've covered so far, and again, it's largely because of sort of when we grew up and the stuff we saw and was influenced by, but it has been, you know, fairly male dominated throughout. But I know you and I have talked about in season 2 of this, you know, looking at some of the female directors out there, and it's just interesting that when we got to W, you know, we've gone this route. So it's all good, and I agree with you. It matters not one bit. So
yeah,
I'm not trying to make an issue of it. I just thought I'd mention it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the current news about them that both of them are now women, when originally it was the eldest brother who went down the transgender route, and now the younger brother's gone down that route as well, and it's very rare that it happens in like one family that siblings would go down that route. So I think from that point of view, that's kind of an amazing thing. But when it comes to filmmaking, you know, it doesn't matter a jot, really.
No, absolutely not. And you know, these are very interesting filmmakers as well. You know, who have been around for a while now, and quite an interesting body of work, I would say.
Well, definitely. I remember actually I did see Bounds before I saw The Matrix. I remember it was suggested to me when I was at Panico to watch this film, because a lot of people had talked about it, and it was very stylishly shot. I mean, just the camera angles and the things they did in the film was really well done. But then, of course, come the summer of '99, I was working in a cinema, and at that point we were looking forward to Phantom Menace. And we had these two little films coming up beforehand. We had The Mummy and The Matrix. And, you know, you thought, oh, well, these will be entertaining, but it ain't going to be Star Wars. And, of course, it turned out that those two films turned out to be far better than The Phantom Menace. If anything, the film we were looking forward to was a massive letdown. And I don't think anybody was expecting The Matrix to be that great.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I was actually at film school when The Matrix came out. So, you know, I, along with, you know, many other people, filmmakers and the public alike, was pretty blown away with the with the first Matrix film, and you know, studied it, and it was one of those first films that I got on DVD back in the day. And yeah, it really was the talk of class, the talk of the class, and the talk of the, you know, filmmaking community that I was involved with out there, definitely. So yeah, it was very good indeed. And I agree, far more of a surprise, and far less disappointing than The Phantom Menace turned out to be. Yes.
Well, yeah. But yeah, I mean, they've had a very sort of interesting filmography, you know, from that point onwards, you know, coming back and doing 2 more sequels, and then doing Speed Racer, which, you know, for my book, it's kind of like a live action cartoon. I mean, especially the use of color in that film. And then, of course, they then produced V for Vendetta, where they have another director come in, but it very much of a style of the Wachowskis. I mean, they certainly had their hands in on that film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is. I mean, I've not seen the director of that film's other work, so I can't tell if that is just solely his, you know, take on things, if that's what his directing style is. But the style, the cutting, and also the idea of people being linked together is very much a Wachowski thing. So I don't know. It's kind of like that. Who really directed Poltergeist conversation? Was it Tobe Hooper or was it Steven Spielberg? And you get that with V for Vendetta as well. Was it what's the chap's name?
I can't remember who directed it, actually. Was it
James McTeague?
Oh, McTeague, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, was it James McTeague or was it the Wachowskis?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, you know, source material wise, it had come from the graphic novel by Alan Moore, and definitely the Wachowskis have always been sort of hugely influenced and inspired by graphic novel work, you know, and that is apparent in a lot of their films and a lot of their output.
Did you ever see Assassins, which is the film they wrote?
Yes, I did. I mean, that's kind of what originally put them on the map. It's what sort of got them the attention of Joel Silver, who obviously later went on to produce the Matrix films, and you know, that was directed by Richard Donner and starring Stallone and Antonio Banderas, if memory serves. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. And Julianne Moore.
And Julianne Moore. How could we forget Julianne Moore? Amazing. Yes. No. Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I've not seen Assassins in a while. I mean, at the time, I kind of enjoyed it to a point, but it did seem just kind of your sort of bog standard, you know, Stallone action vehicle, you know. But
from the 90s, yeah.
But I mean, you know, as I've often mentioned on these podcasts, A, I'm a big fan of Stallone anyway, and B, you know, I'm a big fan of Richard Donner as a director. So I'm sure it's got some merit, but it's something I need to revisit. But I know in terms of the actual story, and I believe the initial screenplay was by the Wachowskis, correct? Yeah,
that's right.
That's one I'll have to go back and revisit at some point, I think.
Indeed. Well, let's get into our picks then. So, Keith, what is your pick for Movie Heaven?
Yeah, well, for Movie Heaven, I did sort of go right back to the start. We've already sort of waxed lyrical slightly about The Matrix, but I didn't pick that for various reasons, which we'll come on to. But I decided to go with Bound, which was indeed the first film that they not only wrote but directed as a duo as well. This was in 1996. It was produced by Dino De Laurentiis, and it was very much, in some respects, a opportunity for them to show that they could handle directing a film, prior to them being able to make The Matrix. And a very, very good and stylish thriller it is too. It's kind of a crime thriller. It's very sort of film noir-esque. And it's one of those films as well that stylistically really does show. I mean, they worked together with cinematographer Bill Pope on this, that also went on to do the Matrix movies and I guess other films of theirs. And it's very interesting. We touched on this whole notion of graphic novel earlier, and apparently Sin City was used as a bit of a sort of graphic reference for this film. And when you watch it, the film itself is kind of devoid of colors apart from the color red. So in other words, it's very monochromatic. It's very black and white and gray in terms of its design, and then obviously lots of red put in there, to enhance things. Which for any people that know, Frank Miller's work on Sin City, it follows a sort of very similar visual aesthetic. But essentially, the film itself, it stars Jennifer Tilly and Gina Gershon as basically. Gina Gershon is an ex-con that's been sort of 5 years in jail and is working as a painter and a plumber, renovating a flat or an apartment, as it would be in America. And she meets Jennifer Tilly, who plays a character called Violet, who is the partner of a character called a mob guy called Caesar, who's played by Joe Pantoliano. Is that correct? Pantoliano? Is that how you pronounce that? I never.
I think you've pronounced it better than I have, because Joe Pantoliano.
Yeah, I don't know, but a frequent Wachowski collaborator, anyway, and he basically plays a mob boss. And one of the things that is quite genius about this film is essentially they've got a movie here, a very entertaining movie that really takes place in just more or less two locations. You've got sort of two apartments that are next to one another in an apartment block, and no more than sort of half a dozen characters really in total in this film. So it is quite a small film in terms of its actual production, but at the same time, it is very, visually stimulating, and it's also a very well written and very tight script. So I think in terms of doing the job to show them as competent filmmakers, this was a really good start for them. And as I said, that's kind of why I chose it as Movie Heaven. Is I do think it's an incredibly good film. Basically, the film deals with there's an attraction between Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly's characters right from the start. And interestingly, even though it does turn into this lesbian relationship, it kind of doesn't make a big deal of that, which I think is quite, for when this was made in the sort of mid-90s, this is kind of a refreshing thing, that it didn't really make an issue about it. It was just there as if it was a male and female protagonist. You know, it just happened to be two women in this particular story. And as I said, they have this attraction which leads into you know, a love affair between them. But by the same token, the world that's Violet, that's Jennifer Tilly's character, is sort of trapped in with Caesar, is very much the whole mafia, the mob, you know, and all of the goings on that happens with that. You know, the violence, the money, you know, the money laundering, things of that nature. And she basically wants a way out and is looking for a way out. And between them, they come up with sort of the perfect plan. And that's why this is such a good thriller, to, you know, get away with money that Caesar was laundering, and sort of escape from him for good and get away with it. And it is very, you know, the film's very tense. It's very violent in places. As I said, there is a big use of this red color, obviously the color of blood, but also the color of passion, interestingly. And yeah, I just think that this film really works on so many levels. You know, it's a really good story. There's lots of twists and turns in the plot. It's very well written. It's very well paced, but it is beautifully shot. It does look like something, you know, the camera. Not only have we got this wonderful use of color and use of space, bearing in mind, as I said, it's quite claustrophobic in so much as it only really takes place in a couple of apartments. But they've thought about everything from the production design to the clothing, but also from the use of camera. I mean, the editing between scenes, the movement of the camera, the placement of the camera, all of this has been really well thought through. And you could tell just by seeing this that these guys at the time, could really knew their craft and really understood their craft and understood the language of filmmaking. So no, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was really good to go back and revisit it.
For me, I hadn't seen it in a long while. I saw it back, I think must have been about 98, 99.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hadn't watched it for a long while, and it was really refreshing to see. And one of the reasons why you know, it's referred to as a noir is the fact that you have this central relationship between Violet and Corky. But the thing is, you're not quite sure if Violet is a femme fatale or not. That if she's trying to use Corky as a way out and possibly screw her over. So you have that tension going throughout the whole film, which I think it's very cleverly done, because there's this sort of certain level that they portray, especially Jennifer Tilly's character, where you're not quite sure if you can trust her or not, but yet it's never spoken about. You don't have somebody going, well, I don't know if I can trust you. It's sort of there, and you have that feeling. And I think it's because it keeps cutting back to Corky being tied up in a wardrobe.
That's right, which is what they start the film on. So again, in terms of the structure of this film, it works very nicely, because they set this tension up at the beginning, and they refer back to it as a motif throughout the plot, throughout the storytelling.
So you know that ultimately Corky's going to end up in that wardrobe tied up, but you don't know what the circumstances are, and you don't know what point in the story it is. And you know, enough time had gone by, so I couldn't remember where that came in the story. I was sort of wrapped up in it again, sort of not knowing if it really was you know, if Violet had really screwed her over or not. And you know, spoilers, she doesn't. Their plan to get the money is that they make it out that the son of this mob boss is the one who did it, and because Joe Pantalona's character Caesar hates him, they don't get on. They feel that he's either not going to do anything or he's going to go on the run, because he ain't going to touch like the mob boss's son for the sake of, because if he does, there'll be a lot of repercussions. But of course, that's not how it works, because Caesar's not exactly, 100%. He's, he goes off the rails, and he does in a massive way.
And he plays it very well. And I have to say, he plays it very well. I mean, it's, there's not a duff performance in this. The acting's of a good standard as well. Interestingly as well, and I think this always, whenever you're creating something, it's always important to sort of draw from what's in your own life and what's personal. And apparently, the Wachowskis, when they sort of first moved to Hollywood, and were trying to sort of get jobs in the film industry as writers and potentially directors at the time, they had a side job as painters and decorators renovating apartments. So I think the fact that they kind of made their lead character in this have that as a job, and which then led to the sort of plot device of it, was very, very clever of them to do that. And the thing is, I mean, when I've taught film studies in the past, I've kind of always harped on and sort of drove my students mad about planning, and the fact that particularly when you're dealing with little time and little money, how you can't suddenly start having a committee on set and being creative on set. You've really got to do a lot of that work in the pre-production. And this film is a prime example of two filmmakers that went into this absolutely prepared, having discussed this with their cinematographer and their editor, and having sort of got everything in place, because when you see the shots and the way this is edited together and executed, everything that happens with that camera is showing you the world, and driving the story, and informing character, and all of those good things that good cinema should do, but also in a very entertaining and stylized fashion as well. So I really do applaud them on this, because this film was made for a fairly modest budget, from what I can understand. And obviously this then got them, in terms of the cinematographer, the editor, and their music composer, Don Davis, this was kind of the creative team that later went on to do the larger projects like the Matrix trilogy, etc., with them. So I just think, if anybody's listening to this that hasn't seen this film, I highly recommend it. It's one of their shorter films. This comes in at 1 hour 40 minutes.
Yes.
but it's a good 1 hour 40 minutes. The story drives along. It keeps you interested. It's just really well done. So it was when we said that we were going to do these guys, it was no big problem for me to come up with what I was going to choose as movie heaven, other than the obvious choice, which would probably be the Matrix. But what a good start to an interesting career, and brilliant stuff. So check it out.
Oh, certainly. And I have to say, I mean, I applaud them for keeping with the people who worked with them on their first project, because at the end of the day, especially if they're experienced, that to take a chance on two unproven directors is it is a roll of the dice. And the fact that they appreciated that and got them on board to do their bigger budgeted films, to bring them along is great, because some directors in the past have you know, they, as soon as they get a bigger budget, they just want a better team. You know, they want somebody more experienced or somebody with lots and lots of credits. So, you know, I applaud them for that. I mean, just, you know, but also I also appreciate the fact that when you work with the same people, you know each other very well, so that you know, you don't have to explain so much. There's a shorthand, so that, you know, getting the films made, you know, you don't have to overly explain everything that you're doing.
No, absolutely. And you know, I think we've touched on this before on other podcasts, but I'm always kind of really fascinated and intrigued by these directing duos, you know, which usually do tend to be siblings in most cases. But you know, in this one, you know, you kind of wonder whether, you know, one of them is more sort of focused towards camera and editing, and the other one's more focused towards working with the actors or whatever. But from what I've managed to sort of find out, you know, these guys don't seem to interview that often.
No, they don't.
And you know, they're very private, it would seem, and yeah, it's always a difficult one to sort of know how they play it. I remember, you know, same thing with the Coen brothers. They tend not to sort of give too much away about the way they work, but when you look at how impressive their body of work is, you know, they're clearly doing something right, and something's working in sync really well with these guys. So you know, I feel the same about these guys as well, that you know, this was definitely, I mean, you know, they got their foot in the door through writing, obviously, as we were saying, with selling the script for Assassins, but you know, this really proved that what they knew and where their talent lied went just beyond the writing and into the actual you know, imagining and conceiving the piece. And yeah, you know, I've got nothing but good things to say about this film. It's a really interesting piece of work. And apparently, initially, before Gina Gershon got involved, Jennifer Tilly was originally going to play the Corky character, apparently, and they had a bit of a once they did a sort of chemistry read with Gina Gershon, it was decided to sort of flip those roles and switch those roles, which you know, again, I always find that kind of interesting in terms of the creative process.
Well, it works out for the best, because it's weird to think of Jennifer Tilly in the other role. I don't think she pulls off, you know, her role very well.
No, absolutely. So as I said, it's an unusual sort of crime thriller, but you know, it does work very well. And for anyone who's sort of interested in, you know, which I presume most people who listen to this podcast are interested in filmmaking, I think it's, you know, quite a good when you do watch it, you know, for like a second time, and you pay more attention to the use of camera and editing and things of that nature in this film. It really works quite nicely, and it just shows you that a lot can be done sometimes, you know, even if you don't have a massive budget. And the schedule of this film, I mean, apparently I think the whole thing was done in like 25 days or something. So that just goes to show you it's you know, you can be creative, and if you planned ahead of time, you can produce something that looks fantastic. So yeah.
Well, moving on to my pick for movie heaven, I've picked Cloud Atlas from 2012. Now, I didn't get a chance to see this film when it came out, just because the press for it was kind of very negative. I remember that they were always going on about how, you know, it's a mess, and, you know, you've got all these actors and they're playing all these, you know, these different parts, and it's just an awful mess. And so I sort of stayed away from it for a while, and then one day I sort of saw it for sale on DVD, and I thought, oh, I'll give this a go. And so I sat down and watched it, and I absolutely love this film. I think it's I think personally, I think it's a masterpiece, and I don't normally say stuff like that, but it is a masterpiece.
Yep.
And the fact that not only is it the Wachowskis, but you've also got Tom Tykwer as well directing. So you have three directors.
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, when you picked it, I was like, oh, really? Okay, because I did see it when it first came out at the cinema, and I must admit, I'd been working all day, and I went to a fairly late screening of this, and it is quite a long film. I mean, it's just shy of 3 hours, I think.
Well, the actual screen time is 2 hours 40 minutes,
Right.
but then when you add all the credits at the end, it's more like 2 hours 50 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I picked it up on Blu-ray for the prep for this podcast, and I have to say, I had a completely refreshed view on the whole thing and enjoyed it thoroughly. And yes, saw things in it that I really hadn't picked up the first time around. So it's a very it's a very complex and well put together film. I thoroughly enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. If that made sense. When you first picked it, I thought, oh really? Oh, okay, well let's have another go. And I went into it with an open mind, and I found new appreciation for this in watching it again. So well done for picking it.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I mean, no, I was all prepared for, if an argument was going to break out.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess for the listeners, it's probably more interesting sometimes if it does. But
yeah.
But no, I thought it was a very well structured, and complex piece of work, and thoroughly enjoyable. But yes, and what a massive undertaking as well, because my understanding of this was, although Warner Brothers actually distributed it, the actual film itself, in terms of its production, was largely an independent production. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. It's actually listed as the one of the biggest budget independent films ever made up to this point.
Wow!
But no, it was good that Warner Brothers picked it up to distribute it, because it could have been. Well, I think it wouldn't have like died a death, but it certainly may not have been seen by as many people as it did.
Mm-hmm.
So the film is based on the novel by David Mitchell, and it was one of those novels that people said it was unfilmable because in the novel it's 6 stories, and what happens structural wise is that you follow one story up to the halfway point, and then it goes to another story, and then it gets to the halfway point and it goes to another story, and then it sort of, when you get to the 6th story, it tells it completely, and then it works its way back to that original story. So as a reader, you're sort of trying to, so you followed the story for a bit, and then you jump into this other story and this other story, and then as you're working your way back, you have to try and remember what had happened before.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a sort of perfect bell curve, isn't it, in terms of the storytelling, in the fact that it goes to that middle point and then back on itself again. But
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's kind of thematic for the actual piece as well, isn't it? Because you're dealing with transcripts throughout those different time periods that are only half finished. So it kind of works nicely, sort of on the thematic level as well.
When it came to the film, they decided to have the 6 storylines playing sort of, so you would dip from one storyline to another as the different stories went along, and it works very well from the point of view that you're dealing with characters who they, because this film is all about oh God, help me here. Oh, what's the word?
What, reincarnation?
Yes, it's all about reincarnation. And so these characters keep getting reincarnated in these different time periods. So you start off in the 18th century, and then you go to the 1970s, and then you have a story that takes place in 2012, and then you have a story that's set. Oh, sorry, I've missed one. I've missed the story that's sort of set just pre World War Two, and then you've got one that's in the future, and then you've got another one that is, you know, in the far flung future. And so you have these sort of, so you have the first story takes place mostly on a ship. The second story is about a composer who's homosexual, and he's trying to get this the Cloud Atlas set text. He's, you know, to write it, and using this composer to get it out there in the world. And then you have the story about a reporter who's trying to uncover a conspiracy that's taking place in nuclear power. And then you have, you know, the story about the publisher whose client, who's this like this Irish gypsy criminal. He's written his memoirs, and of course through this incident where a reviewer gets thrown out a window, the sales go through the roof, but of course he doesn't have the money to pay off, you know, this crook's partners, and so he goes into hiding at an old people's home. And I have to say that story is actually quite funny.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the things. I mean, yes, this is a very nicely constructed.
Yeah, but I mean, let me just flesh out the other parts, and you can jump in. So then you have then you get the story that's set in the future, which is set in Neo Soul, about these they're called fabricants. So they're like replicants, you know. they're created to be they work at like fast food restaurants, so everything there is artificial, including, you know, the people who serve you, and they're little more than slaves. And one of them is rescued by these rebels to sort of try and, you know, get that truth, this truth out that all is not what it seems. And then finally you have what's called After the Fall, where it's gone back to kind of Stone Age kind of times, where it's in this valley where people are very, you know, living off the land. And you also have these sort of cannibals sort of raging around the woods and stuff. So you have these 6 different kinds of stories, you know, ranging from a, you know, historical Moby Dick kind of story to you know, a drama, and then into a comedy, and then into sci-fi, and then into, like, you know, Mad Max realm. So you have these different sort of genres and stories playing together, and it just works so well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I agree entirely. I mean, that's one of the beauties of this, is the fact that you do get the different genres in there, and like you said, the sort of middle bit with the you know, with Jim Broadbent in the old people's home, you know, is quite sort of you know, comedic, but you know, you've also kind of got the themes running through this, and you know, you mentioned slavery, and really slavery to a certain extent is a theme that runs through all of the stories as well, you know, which again, apart from the whole reincarnation side of things, sort of holds those stories together very well. And I mean, again, this is, in terms of being beautifully constructed, when you look at the sort of editing and how these different times and different scenes merge into one another, you know, that's incredibly well thought through as well, and amazing when you think that essentially you did have sort of 3 directors and 2 units working on this at any one time. And from a you have quite a small ensemble, but it really is an actor's dream, for this ensemble of largely Oscar-winning actors that you've got in there, or award-winning actors, are getting to play different races, different ethnicities, and even different sexes, which is quite interesting.
It's funny how and sometimes you don't realize they're the same actors. So each actor has a part to play in each one of the storylines, and in one of the storylines they may be one of the main players, and in another storyline they may just be like a face in the crowd, and that's also a nice thing. So you don't have like one actor who is he having the whole thing on his shoulders. Each actor has their moment to shine in each one of these storylines, and it's this great game of of saying which actor is that playing, and it's amazing sometimes when you think, oh bloody hell, that was that actor, because they show you them on the end credits at the end, the parts that they played.
Yeah, and some of them you wouldn't even know, would you? It's like
I know. Well, the Ben Whishaw playing Georgette, which is the wife of the brother to Timothy Cavendish, which is the Jim Broadbent character, played by
Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant, looking very much like the lead singer of The Who.
Yes.
When you first see him, and he's with his curly blonde hair and his glasses, he does look like the lead singer of The Who. But yeah, but the lovely thing as well, though, is that the character choices as well that they play also echo the characters that they've played in other stories. So the whole thing that with Ben Wishaw's playing Robert Frobisher, who's the composer, he sort of tries it on with Jim Broadbent's character, and so it's funny to think that he tries it on with him, and yet in the the Timothy Cavendish story, Jim Broadbent's the one who tried it on with Ben Whishaw as the wife. So you have that kind of thing, and I tell you, there's a wonderful bit of editing storytelling where. So in the Neo Soul story, you have this love story between the fabricant called Somi, and what's the other guy's name? Chang, played by Jim Sturgis. And there's this wonderful love story, and of course there's a spoiler, but Jim Sturgis dies, but then it cuts to it cuts to I'm thinking about the bit where she gets executed at the end. That the whole plan was that she was going to die, become a martyr, and when she dies, it then cuts to the opening story where you see Jim Sturgis's character goes through the door and sees his wife, who of course is the same actress who's played Somi in the future. It's wonderful because it, on an emotional point of view, it works so well that even though this one storyline ended badly, this other storyline with these two characters, goes on, and that, that it's just great on the fact that all these sort of different connections between all the different timelines. So each story affects each other. So with the opening story, you have Ben Wishaw's character in the second story reading the diary of the main character, then a journal of his voyage, and of course, but he doesn't know how it finishes because half the book's missing. Then his story connects to the other stories because he writes this piece of music that is used throughout the different stories. They keep appearing. In the 1970s, it's a record. In the future, it's it's like an anthem or a song that the fabricants sing when their time of service is over, and then with and of course the lover of Ben Whishaw's character appears in the 70s one as well, as a character, as an older character, and his letters that he wrote to him, you know, are being read by the character played by Halle Berry, and so it figures into that story. And then of course the whole neo soul, you have the character of Som Mi, who in the final, you know, in the sixth story is, you know, is a god to these people, because her teachings have gone on after her death. And it is about how, you know, either good or bad deeds that are done in the past echo all the way to the future. And it's just, I mean, it's from a writing point, it's amazing that it is, you can actually follow it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, it works. I mean, you could kind of tell, I guess, that this was like a sort of passion piece for these guys. I mean, I believe what happened was the novel was actually, I believe when Natalie Portman was working on V for Vendetta, she was reading the novel of Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, and she gave it to Lana Wachowski, who then kind of read it and thought, oh, this is amazing, you know, this would make a great film. And you know, they obviously got Tom Tykwer and whatever involved, but the you know, everything you're saying about how it all links in is absolutely true, and absolutely, you know, really well put together and conceived. But one of the other things is that the piece of music, I think, is actually a beautifully written piece of music as well. And
the Cloud Atlas set text, it's really is great piece of music,
which is, you know, and as you said, very imaginatively used, in the fact that it is actually used in every period but in a different way, and again linking it all together, you know,
all the periods apart from the first one, from when it wasn't written.
Yeah, absolutely. But
it's like a character in its own sense, that it is something that, you know, is used throughout. I can understand why people didn't like this so much when it came out, because it is a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's not a passive watch, that's for sure.
No. But yeah, I always get sucked in every time I see it, and you know, even though it's sort of near 3 hours, it just flies by.
Now, I have to agree with you. Now I've watched it again. I mean, I think the first time I watched it at the cinema, as I said, I didn't really sort of appreciate it for what it was. But you know, having sort of watched it and got sucked into it and given it my full attention, it is beautifully constructed. Absolutely.
It's one of those films that, you know, when they say it's a film that has everything, it does, because, you know, it makes you cry, it makes you laugh, you know, it's exciting, it makes you think, and it's just this wonderful. It just does seem to have all these different things going, and you know, it's up there in like my top 100 films, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it is a love story as well throughout, which is the other universal thing that links it all. No, I heartily agree with you. I think it's very well put together, very well conceived. I enjoyed watching it this time, and it is one that, you know, there are so many, if you like, Easter eggs in this film that you could go back and probably watch it about 30 times and spot something different each time.
I tell you what, there's one Easter egg in there that I think a lot of people miss, and it's the fact that throughout the film you see Som Mai in an interrogation room being interviewed, by I'm trying to think what the character's name is, but he's like I think he's called the Archivist, and so in the in the final section of the film, the final timeline in after the fall, they have this religion, and they have like kind of like Bibles, and the thing is, it's, if you look carefully, it actually says it's written by the archivist. So this guy actually had taken what she had said to him and put it into like text for other people to read. And I thought, I saw that in like one of the EPKs that come on the disc, and I thought, wow, I never saw that before.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it makes sense.
It even drills down as far as the actual metal of the cover is made from the collars that the slaves in the future are wearing, and I believe the writing itself is woven from the strands of hair or something. They've really gone into that level of micro detail, haven't they?
Yeah, but it's, in the film, it's like, it really is like a close-up that you blink and you miss it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
But I have to say as well, the other thing I think it works really well character-wise is that each character, each actor's characters go on like a journey. So if you take Tom Hanks' character, his, the doctor he plays in the beginning, he's a bad man. But yet as the story goes along through each of these characters, he does get to a point where he changes the path he's on. Because if with old Hugh Grant, he's just evil throughout the whole damn thing, isn't he? He's just, from beginning to end, he's just a bad man.
Yeah.
And his levels of badness just get, worse and worse as we go along.
Throat-cutting cannibal. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, as I say, with Tom Hanks' character, his doctor character is in some way redeemed by the end by the final character that he plays in the far-flung future. And so, I mean, it's just nice things like that, and you do kind of see that sort of progression between the characters. I mean, I have to say, Hugo Weaving as kind of like a Nurse Ratched character was amazing.
Yes, there you go.
I mean, that's just worth the price of admission alone.
In drag and in a fat suit.
I tell you what, the Wachowskis have really done well by Hugo Weaving. I mean, he's more or less been in all his films since The Matrix.
Yes,
it's great that he can play sort of, he can play either evil or good, but you do kind of get the feeling he relishes playing evil, and he certainly does with his version of Nurse Ratched.
Yes. No, I mean, again, anyone listening, check this out. If you think we're crazy or whatever, honestly, check it out. It's well worth your time. Looking at the pure filmmaking and storytelling that went into this, it is a wonderfully complex film and production on all levels. So I think it really works, and well done, because as I said, when you picked it, I was like, oh, I don't know, no, I completely wasn't in tune when I saw this on the big screen. Sadly, I obviously wasn't in the right place for it at the time.
I have to say, for such you feel like it's a film you should have watched on the big screen, but I think it's a very personal film. I think the reason why I connected so quickly with it is the fact that I saw it by myself and I saw it, at home. And I think also the fact is, it's not a film that I share with people either. It's something that I sit down and watch by myself, because I don't know. I think I might be afraid that if I started showing it to people, they'd be going, no, that's shit, isn't it? There's just a lot of people doing dress up. Oh, this is fucking awful.
Yeah, well, certainly a lot of people like to rag on it. That's for sure. I mean, I've heard this fairly highly criticised by part of the if you like, the filmmaking community that I know, a lot of people really kind of rag on this. And having, as I said, having rewatched it, and looking at the layer of detail in this, probably undeservedly so. And obviously, it's not just the Wachowskis that need the credit for this. Of course, Tom Tyker did his part as well, and a great director in his own right. I mean, Run Lola Run is a fantastic film. Again, really enjoyed that one. So he's a competent filmmaker as well. So
no, he's much better than a competent filmmaker. It's just he's not made much.
No.
I mean, this is the thing. I mean, all the advertising, you got the directors of The Matrix and Run Lola Run, and I mean, Run Lola Run came out in the 90s. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna have a look now, but I think
he's done a few things.
He's done a few things. Perfume,
which is obviously where
great.
he kind of met Ben Whishaw, who features in this film as well. So yeah, I wasn't keen on the international though, I have to say.
Right, yeah. No, I did see the international, yeah. But I mean, there's a massive gap between Run Lola Run and his other films. So, he hasn't done much.
Well, the German film industry maybe is not that easy, I guess.
Possibly. But before we move on, I have to ask: do you believe in reincarnation?
Oh,
do you believe that you've been here before?
That's a big question for this podcast, isn't it? And you know how good I am at being on the spot, Simon. Every time you put me on the spot, I always talk around actually ever giving an answer to anything.
Cool. Well, here's a simple question: do you believe in reincarnation or not? Yes or no?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's got to be some meaning to all of this, hasn't there? There's got to be some meaning to all this nonsense. But I mean, particularly the way it's the way it's dramatized in this film, shows it as a progressive and as a good thing. So one can only hope. But I like to think there's definitely something. I like to think that this isn't the only crack I've got at life. Let's just put it that way, But hey, this one's not over yet, damn it.
No, but what if the Tibetans are right and you come back as a animal?
Well, there you go. Hey, so there are those who argue I am anyway. What kind of animal would I like to be? There's a question.
Exactly, that's what I'm going to ask you. Yeah,
I don't know. Top of the food chain. What about you? I'm going to put it back on you. What about you?
Oh, what would I come back as? I come back as a lion.
Do you believe in it or not?
Oh, do I believe in reincarnation? Yeah, I do. I mean, there's times in my life where you get a sense of deja vu that you've been somewhere before.
Always, yeah.
But the thing is, we can't remember it properly, so it's one of those things where it's kind of like you don't know, really.
I feel like we're entering the Matrix here, actually.
Well, yeah, but I mean, okay. Well, I mean, it is kind of a theme that the Wachowskis have hit on before with the Matrix because of of Neo's character being reincarnation of the one before, because Morpheus does talk about a man who could manipulate the Matrix to any way he wanted, and then so yeah, I mean it's it's a tough one, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, we really don't know, and we all like to think that when we die there is something else, like as it says in the film, that death is only a doorway.
Maybe this is named Movie Heaven, Movie Hell for a reason.
You know what? There's an interesting theory about that time is like an elastic band, and that at some point it's going to bounce back. it's going to reach such a point that it's going to, I mean, between time and space, that it's going to reach such a point that it's going to go backwards. So when you hear things like, like they say in the Bible about, being risen from the dead and stuff, well, imagine if time was going backwards, that would be true, that you would rise from the dead, that you would live again. So, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, who knows? Maybe we get to live this life again, but instead of dying, we wake up and we just get younger.
That would be nice. Wow. Wow, we've gone deep. We've gone deep with this podcast. Wow. We're supposed to be talking about movies. No, I'm just kidding. That's all good.
Well, we'll get back to the movie talk after these messages.
So, you're making a film?
Horror film. Meta horror film. A horror film about horror film. Horror film about cinema.
And why would you do that? Life is so beautiful. You just have something in your eye.
I thought you said you wanted to do something different. Why do the same thing that everyone else is doing?
It drives me mad. They all have opinion on everything. Nobody listens to me. Nobody tries to understand anything. Just too much. I found out recently that I had a syndrome when I was younger. When I try to go to sleep, the whole world will change. Like everything will go too quick, too slow, or too big, too small. And I could control it.
Benny Loves Killing. Available now on Vimeo and IndieFlix.
And if they don't go for it, you'll kill them all.
Do you like science fiction and fantasy? Do you like things to be rigorously, or rather obsessively alphabeticized? Then do we have the show for you. The A to Z of SFF takes a wry, lightly fictionalized approach to the compulsive breaking over of pop culture artifacts that make up so much of today's podcastosphere. We cover everything from RNA Aardvark to Zardoz, and all points in between. Zardoz might be a welcoming mind. We've been at this for a year and we haven't finished the A's yet. The A to Z of SFF, a podcast of epic triviality. 2 men, 26 letters, 1 universe. Search for us on iTunes or your favourite podcast app as the A to Z of SFF, or check out our website, theatozofsff.com.
What's the matter, Jane?
It's kind of hard to explain. I can't put my finger on it, but there's definitely something wrong. Jane?
I suppose we can't expect her to get over it just like that.
It must be past this.
It's so bright. Why is it so bright in here?
It's just the dawn, Jane.
You have to take her to the hospital. Have her placed under constant watch.
Well, that much I know, but who done it?
You don't even try and stop me. You know I'm going to harm you, yet you do nothing. What about that wonderful husband of yours?
Oh, Martin. I love him.
Well, someone has to die.
Blood and Roses. Available now on Amazon.com, on DVD and video on demand. Well, I hope that's cleared your palate now. We've heard these adverts. So we'll get back to the movie talk now. Keith, if there was any film that you could unwatch, what would it be?
Well, I'll put it this way: as if we haven't already got a headache talking about reincarnation and the meaning of life. Yeah, I mean, okay, we've waxed lyrical about the Wachowskis on this so far, but it's not all good, is it? It's not all good.
This is there is the one thing about the Wachowskis, and I say it here: when they're good, they're great, and when they're bad, they are fucking awful.
Yeah, it's not all good. So what I have picked for movie hell is actually The Matrix Revolutions, which is the third and final film in the Matrix trilogy. I've already said at the beginning of the podcast, as my sort of caveat, that I am a major fan of the first Matrix film. Thought it was absolutely brilliant and works on so many levels and almost deserves its own podcast just to talk about that. However, I did not feel this way about the sequels, particularly the third film third installment in the series. By the time these came out in 2003, and they were obviously released sort of 6 months apart from one another, I was now back in the UK, living in London, and I remember maybe the reason that the second film I'm a little fonder of is because my memory of that was I went to a BAFTA screening of it at the IMAX in London, and it was actually introduced by Joel Silver. So, you know, it was a bit of an event. It was a bit of an event, that film.
I just want to say, even though I mean, I saw this on video, I didn't actually go to the cinema, and so I didn't have Joel Silver introduce it. But I find that the second one kind of is better of the two, but what a pale imitation when it comes to the first one.
I agree.
Really dropped the ball. And the thing was, so, you know, when The Matrix came out and was such a big hit, you know, they came out and said, well, this is part of a trilogy. We got 2 more films coming. And you're going, 2 more films? I can't wait to see this. I mean, the promise at the end of the first one was gonna be fucking amazing, and then they
well, basically what I mean, it seems to me that they ended up, I mean, again, the first one, although it had a budget, it was you know, obviously wasn't as big a budget as the 2 sequels, and what it seemed to me was that they ended up with so much money and obviously so much time, because they made these 2 sequels over sort of a 6-year period or whatever it was.
Sorry, did you say 6 years?
Yeah, it was 99 to 4 years then. 4 years. Sorry.
Yeah.
But you know, just seemed that suddenly the whole the themes of it and the amount of characters and everything got so vastly expanded that that for me, you know, it turned into a visual fest, and I cared less about the actual plot and character aspect. Whereas I think the first film was a wonderful balance of all of that, and obviously, you know, it broke a lot of sort of filmmaking boundaries. I mean, first of all, you know, we've given them a lot of praise, but let's just get a couple of facts about these guys down. Okay, they do tend to take a lot of credit for things that they weren't necessarily the first to come up with. Okay,
right.
You know, from a visual point of view, you know, from the fight scenes and the way those fight scenes are photographed, although very incredibly well done, you know, this is nothing that Hong Kong cinema hadn't been doing for some time before them anyway. Okay, so they often get a lot of credit for sort of revolutionizing, for use of a better word here, you know, the way filmmaking happens and the way films are shot and the way films look. You know, that's not strictly true. I mean, obviously, yes, they brought it to the mainstream and they brought it in a very entertaining way to the mainstream. But, you know, a lot of this stuff had been done before, so they were borrowing to a certain extent.
Well, yeah. I mean, all right. I see your point, and the thing is, yes, what they did was they took wire work, they took anime, and they took, you know, Hong Kong, you know, John Woo type films, and they put them all together, and they put it out as this new package called The Matrix. And so if you were, you know, familiar with any of them, of course you'd seen all that stuff, but it was done in such a it was done in such an entertaining way.
Oh, it was, yeah, and I'm not going to take that away from
Yeah.
them. No, absolutely. And let's be honest, films and television and the way they looked following the first Matrix, you know, everybody kind of jumped on this bandwagon, and we had bullet time and, you know, all of that sort of thing. Like, you know, I'm a big fan of the TV show Smallville, and definitely the way they tried to show sort of Clark Kent's powers in that show was to adopt some of these some of these visual elements that had been established in the Matrix. So no, I'm not taking anything away from them on that certainly. The other thing is, in terms of thematics and storytelling, I mean, it does make me laugh that there are loads of philosophical and theological essays and you know, things done into this, you know, with comparisons from everything from you know, Plato to Nietzsche, etc. But I mean, this is nothing that the likes of, you know, Philip K. Dick and William Gibson and you know, hadn't already been sort of doing with sci-fi and the whole sort of cyberpunk movement. And in terms of basic storyline of the Matrix, you know, when you start sort of stripping away all of the sort of mythology and you know, the hero's journey, which obviously Lucas borrowed from that when he was doing Star Wars, etc. But when you look at sort of the basic premise, you know, the sort of machines taking over mankind, then, you know, that's obviously resonates in things like the Terminator and Battlestar Galactica and you know, loads of different sci-fi as well. So it does make me laugh a little bit when there are some of these. I mean, I've got the. Again, you know, I'm guilty of it. I bought into it. I've not got these on Blu-ray actually, but I did buy the massive 10-disc Ultimate Matrix collection when it came out. The one that was in the box with the graphics all down it. And you know, there's something like 35 hours of bonus material on this. Very little of it from the Wachowskis themselves, but there's actually a philosopher's commentary, which I haven't listened to yet. I mean, I've watched the documentary on it, but I haven't actually listened to the commentary. But I can imagine that's probably quite amusing in places. But there's also by contrast, there's a critic's commentary as well, which I'm sure would be rather interesting to listen to at some point.
When you were talking about, you know, that these guys, well, that the Wachowskis, you know, said that they were responsible for bringing a lot of this stuff when they had borrowed from other places. Where do you think that has come from? What people have written about them, or if it's come from them? Because, as you said, they don't give many interviews, so I don't think that they would be going around bragging. You know, they're not Tarantino.
No, to be fair to them, I'm not sure it has come from them actually. I think it's come from you know, film theory studiers and things of that nature, and I believe that a lot of it is actually been probably written by critics and you know, and like trying to sort of be clever or sound clever or whatever. But yeah, I don't know whether it's come from the Wachowskis themselves or not. And also, I'm not disputing that there are those things there to an extent. I just think that a lot of it has been read into somewhat. It's almost like when we were talking about Kubrick and we were talking about The Shining and Room 237 and how people have gone and they've sort of really read into the work to the nth degree. I feel that the Matrix trilogy has had that treatment to an extent as well. And let's be honest, it's not a bad thing. I mean, that's what makes these films interesting. So I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't think you kind of sort of had finished that point or got that point across very well.
Okay, I'm glad you stopped me then and stopped me from sounding like a complete arse. Yeah, no. I mean, I totally respect what they've done.
Yeah.
I'm just putting a bit of context to what I'm about to say about the Matrix Revolution. So.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let you get into the meat of it, but I'm just gonna say it now and get it out of the way. The reason why the sequels don't work is the fact that there is no threat. The thing is that the first one works really well, and why you care for Neo is the fact that he is thrown into this world, or thrown out of this world and then thrown back in, if you know the story. But he is at risk. He could die. He could be killed. And then when it came to the sequels, he's Superman.
Yes, he has become Superman by that point, yeah. To the point of literally flying, yeah.
And so they tried to come up with something to kind of... So instead of coming up with a bigger threat or something, or some other twist, they try and talk about like control, and they have the whole thing with the Smiths, and it just doesn't, it just sort of kind of falls apart. It really falls apart in the third one, because the third one, the beginning seems to be like filler, and then we're just waiting for this massive battle, and then you just have the showdown at the end, and then you just have all this philosophically weird dialogue in there that just makes no fucking sense at times.
Oh yeah, I mean the whole stuff with the architect and the oracle, you know, just after a while just does your head in.
Wow, no, I think what does my head in, I mean, if we focus just on Revolutions, is the fact that the bit where Neo's at the tube station.
Yeah.
And he's speaking to these two programs who are, you know, a couple, and they're taking their child off to be with the Oracle, who is the worst child actor ever. And why the fuck is she in this film so much? I don't know. I mean, okay, I can't, it's not her fault, but she is very annoying. I do sometimes think she's just in there so that Hugo Weaving can say, cookies need love too. But this whole talk about, he's sort of saying to him, oh, you know, you've had a child, and, you know, love. And he's questioning them, isn't he? And he says, yes, well, I believe in karma. Karma is a word. Yes, karma is a word. And then he sort of says, he asks, oh, I didn't think that programs could love. Well, love is a word. You're sitting there going, what the fuck? You know, it's just like, so you have that opening, and then you have the whole bit with Trinity and Morpheus go to meet the Frenchman, whose name I can never fucking pronounce.
Yeah, I'm always too busy looking at Monica Bellucci at that point.
Okay, but anyway, so you know they go after.
God, I'm shallow. Sorry.
Yeah, so they do a repeat of the shootout scene, the lobby shootout scene in the first Matrix, and then they
not as well, I might add.
Not as well at all. And they get to the Frenchman, and the Frenchman says, "Oh, I will release him if you give me the Oracle's eyes." And you think, "Oh, okay, this is kind of interesting. What's the Oracle eyes and what's this thing?" And they just completely go, no, fuck that shit. I'm just going to stick a gun to your head and make you give me Neo back. And that just works. And you're like, what the hell was the point of introducing the Oracle's eyes into this?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, I have to say, after 6, I watched it all back to back to see how well it all worked, and after 6 hours of the Matrix, I was matrixed out. I mean, I was like, just give me the fucking blue pill, please, you know. So
I just want to be like Cypher. Could you put me back in the machine and just wipe my memory?
Exactly. No, I mean, okay, so the Matrix Revolutions. Here's my reasons why I just found this one in particular to be pants and really hard work to sit through. You know, the second film, I enjoyed to a point, in so much as, if nothing else, at least the highway, the freeway chase was pretty amazing stuff visually to watch. Even though, interestingly, it didn't feature Neo at all, because he was too busy sort of flying from the other side of the world or wherever he'd been dumped.
Well, yeah, well, he just had his set piece before, where the fight on the stairs, which was quite good as well.
It was, but but by the time we got to the third film, there was very much there was very little that actually sort of took place in the sort of Matrix, in sort of the real world, in inverted commas, part of the Matrix. And what I found with the film was it was a lot of repetition. I mean, first of all, you definitely cannot watch this film on its own, because it picks up pretty much immediately. It's almost as if they literally just cut the film in half. It picks up immediately where the second one ended. There's no sense of recap whatsoever here. It's just kind of, you're thrown straight into it. And I have to say, straight into a rather boring, wordy scene with a load of characters that you're not that familiar with, because Morpheus is in there, but then you've got all of these other captains. Suddenly you've got this much larger ensemble, and you've got the fleet of the ships at Zion and all this sort of thing, and you've got all this talk around this Bane character as to whether or not he sabotaged the ship at the end of the previous film. So you're sort of thrown straight into it with, I mean, I was watching them back to back, and even I was playing catch up, and I'd only just watched it. So I was like, okay, so you're sort of thrown straight into that. But the other thing is, in terms of repetition, in the second film, in the first film, we had an amazing fight in the subway between Neo and Agent Smith, which was I thought really well done. It was, again, using this wire work and stunt work in a really imaginative way. It was using bullet time to go around the action and follow the bullets, and it was a really good fight scene, and it was it was one-on-one, and it was pretty fun. Then in the second one, we get that awful bloody, I found it tedious, playground scene with about 1,000 Agent Smiths. So by the time we got to the third film, and it's like, let's make it different by having it in the rain. But I was like, I so don't care. I was so switched off of the fighting by that point. And and don't get me wrong, I love a good screen fight, but by this point, it just kind of felt like more of the same and quite boring, I have to say.
Let's talk about that just for a second. In the Matrix, the fight scenes all had a purpose. That was action as storytelling.
It was, yeah.
So these fights, especially the fight in the tube station, was a moment where, as Morpheus says, he's starting to believe. He's starting to believe that he could be the one, even though he has been told by the Oracle he isn't the one. Maybe in the next life, which is, that was the other thing about the first Matrix. Lovely little things that they say, which you think means one thing, but then turns out to be actually, a sort of heads up of what was going to happen. And so these fights were, they had a purpose. They forwarded the story. The fights in the sequels really didn't.
No, they were just spectacle.
Especially the third one. I think in the second one, they did kind of work. They kind of were forward in the story, but they were forward in the story for the the secondary characters and not for the main character.
Yeah, like the freeway chase was to get the keymaker or whatever his name, whatever he was, away from those guys, which was fair enough, but yeah, I mean, the first film, it had a proper beginning, middle, and end. You felt, like your point earlier, you felt that the characters were in jeopardy. you know, and everything either served the character or served the moving the plot forward. So it worked really, really tightly and really well. But by the time you got to Matrix Revolutions, it was all about spectacle and what we can do and visual effects, and quite frankly, was a lot of the same stuff, just not as interesting in my opinion.
And also, I don't think the use of CGI characters in it worked either, where Neo or Agent Smith or one of the other characters would be, you know, replaced by a CGI double, because it sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah,
and it just it takes you out of it, which, like, the first Matrix didn't have that. You know, you didn't have because they used it for a lot for the flying scenes. And
I mean, also you have, you know, the other big problem with the third film, but by the time you got there, is you've got so many now additional characters that that suddenly I'd lost connection with most of them. I mean, one of the bits of the film that I remember, because I'd only seen it the once at the cinema before watching it this weekend on DVD, and that says a lot, because obviously the previous films I'd seen multiple times. Even the second one, I think I'd watched a few more times than that. But this, and I remember finding it tedious at the cinema, and I found it tedious in this. The whole attack on Zion was just, for me, so much CG and just visual stimuli. I mean, it kind of this sort of started what the later Transformers films and Avatar and even the last act of Man of Steel did for me. It was just all like CGI fights and you know, battles and all this sort of thing, and I'd really lost connection with it and wasn't really drawn in at all.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't say for me the connection was that the characters you were following in the middle of that battle, you didn't care about, really. I mean, you were following a young kid and, you know, and a woman who you kind of met in the other one, but, you know, there was, again, stakes. You just didn't have any stakes in these characters. If they had died, it wouldn't have mattered, really, you know. And there's just, yeah, I mean, you have this massive battle scene in the middle where you have none of the main characters in there. They're not under jeopardy.
Yeah.
And I also have to say, the worst death scene ever, when Trinity gets taken out. I mean, it's nasty. You see like a second of her being impaled, and she's just lying there all calm, you know, going, "Oh, well, you saved me, and, you know, and I'm happy I loved you." It's just giving like this long monologue, and you're thinking, bloody hell, woman, I'd be screaming.
Yeah.
if I was still alive, I think with all those spikes sticking out of me, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
But no, she has time to, you know, to do a whole speech.
It just seemed to me that with the sequels, you know, they had a chance to, you know, expand out this world even further, but, you know, they do it by showing like a tantric rave scene and
well, this is the thing, when you heard of Zion in the film, in the first Matrix, you thought, wow, I would love to see it, and then they showed it to you and you were like, I wish I hadn't seen it now.
Just kind of. And then the other thing, I mean, I know you said about, you know, we were talking about Hugo Weaving and the fact that he relishes playing the bad guy, but I mean, he relished it a little bit too much when he sort of consumed the Oracle and then went into this menacing moustache Dr. Evil style laugh, and I was just like, oh, please, come on. No, it was just a bit much. So you know, this third film for me, and it was also, I have to say, I found it anticlimactic. I mean, I know it had to end. I know it had to complete the story. etc. But and you know, it tried to end it with a ray of hope and all this sort of thing. But I don't know. I was kind of lost connection, and of course one of the things, and again, this is very sad. This is no one's fault, but you know, in this particular film, they changed the actress because they had to, because sadly the old lady died. And one of the things they did do is at least they addressed it rather than just left it like loads of films do. But they almost addressed it a little bit too much. I felt it was kind of like mentioned in every single scene, and it was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, we know it's a different actress, but let's move on from it.
I mean, I've been thinking about it, and I was. How would you have felt if it had turned out that they were still in the Matrix? That, like, Zion and the outside world was just another Matrix that they had, that they were stuck in. How would you have felt if that had been what it was all about? That they had found out that they were actually still in the machine?
Well, the dark character in me would have kind of liked that, actually. I guess. I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest. By midway through that film, I really don't. You know, I was almost getting to the point where I'm thinking, you know what? It's only the first film that exists in my mind. I just thought they over diluted it and they kind of ruined it.
When they say it was a trilogy, I don't believe it for a second, because that first film is a complete film and it should have just been left as that film. Because what we could imagine that Neo would have got up to in the Matrix would have been a hell of a lot better than what they actually turned out in the sequels.
Yeah. And then the other thing, and we touched on this a little bit when we were having our discussion in the David Toy one about the Chronicles of Ridiculous. But you know, we mentioned in how, with that the animated bridging film, it didn't really matter if you'd seen it or not. Yeah. But obviously with this, again from the same filmmakers, I believe, they had the Animatrix film.
They were different filmmakers, but yes, the animator who had done the Tales of Riddick connecting story, and who also was responsible for the original Neon Flux cartoons. Yeah. He did one of the films. He did the one at the end,
right?
Where this is, but I mean, yeah, I actually went back and I watched the Animatrix, and I have to say the Animatrix was far more entertaining than these films were, just for the fact that, you know, you had these different points of view and different stories, and it was about different characters.
But is it right that you're supposed to connect more with the boy if you've seen the Animatrix? Because I'll be honest, I didn't really. There's this boy in it that sort of worships Neo and believes he's the one and all this sort of stuff. And they kind of refer to stuff.
Yeah, Neo keeps telling him that, you know, that he got himself out, and you see that in the Animatrix, and you also see how they got the information about the machines digging into Zion, and you see what happened to that crew and how they got the information to a drop point. I mean, also the fact that you had to play the game as well.
Right.
Because, you know, in the middle of Reloaded, when they're on the highway and Morpheus falls off the truck, and there is Jada Smith driving a car and she catches him.
Yeah.
Well, the game tells you how they got there, how they got to that point.
No, right.
And it's like, okay. And also just the, you know, the whole bit at the end where they have to take out they have to take out the power grid and a backup system, and the bit with Jada Pinkett Smith's character is very short, but in the game you get to see the whole of that thing. And yeah, it's just this whole multimedia idea is a good idea, but it just doesn't work, because at the end of the day, as a film goer, I just want to go and watch the film and enjoy the film, and then if there's this other stuff as well, that's great. But if I have to fully enjoy a film by watching all this other stuff, then obviously the film doesn't work.
Exactly. It's like we said before, it's okay if it's there to sort of provide some backstory and flesh out characters or whatever, but the film must work as a standalone or, you know, on its own.
Yeah.
And you know, that's the thing for me, that the first film is beautifully written, beautifully made, and put together, and works really nicely. In my opinion, these sequels are over bloated, and you know, it's all about spectacle, and they seem to have lost the thread of the actual characters and story. For me personally, as I said, I know there's loads of people that disagree with that and read all sorts of things into this.
I think a lot of people will agree on the fact that the third one was the weakest of the three films. I mean, I'm like you. I think I like the first film. I own that on DVD. I don't own the other films on DVD, just because you know, I just find them a bit tedious and, you know, not that interesting. They don't really, you know, build upon what they had in the first one.
Well, there is a nice Blu-ray digibook of the first film that I've kind of got my eye on, so I might treat myself to that at some point. But yeah, I don't really feel the need to buy the entire trilogy box set on Blu-ray, because I've got the Ultimate Edition on DVD, and trust me, there's enough material on there that I still haven't watched. So.
Well, let's get out of the Matrix.
Yeah, let's please get out of the Matrix. I mean, I'm sure, you know, again, we've probably just, you know, talked about the tip of the iceberg here, but overall, I feel that's probably, well, I would say it's their second worst outing, but I think you're about to top it.
Yes, we get ourselves out of the Matrix just to go into outer space and go all the way to Jupiter. So yes, my pick is Jupiter Ascending. So after the high of Cloud Atlas, they followed it up with this film, and I did a podcast with Rob and Clive called The Speakeasy, where we spoke about our picks for the films that were coming out that summer. It was 2 years ago. And originally Jupiter Ascending was going to be a summer release. And then Warner Brothers put out the news that it was going to be delayed and it was going to come out the following February. And we thought, oh, okay. So I wonder, you know, your first thought is when they say something like that, you think, what's wrong?
Yeah.
You know, something's obviously, well, something must be wrong. And then the film came out, and if people thought that Cloud Atlas was a mess, then they ain't seen nothing.
Yeah.
Because Jupiter Ascending is a mess. It's not a glorious mess. It's just a mess. So the story is about this character called Jupiter Jones, and she finds out that she is the reincarnation of this queen. And this dynasty that's out in space, this family, they own most of the universe, and what they do is they've been living for eons. And the way they do this is they plant human beings onto planets, and then when they're matured, they harvest them for their, I guess, DNA or materials, and they use that to rejuvenate themselves, to keep them going. And so it turns out that Jupiter Jones actually owns the Earth, which is ready to be harvested by a very unconvincing bad guy played by
Eddie Redmayne, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who talks like this a lot.
Yes, you wouldn't believe he was an Oscar winner.
They should hand back my Oscar. You know, he's kind of trying to do, I don't know, he looks like Ming the Merciless, but sounds like his very weak brother. And he talks a lot like this. And then suddenly I shout for no reason. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you've got him. You've got Channing Tatum, who plays a dog man with jet boots, which, you know, the jet boots are pretty cool. And, you know, he does a lot of flying about. and which is a good thing because Jupiter Jones seems to fall down a hell of a lot. I think the main problem with the story is the fact that you have a main character who doesn't change much.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout it, she is mostly a damsel in distress that Channing Tatum's character has to come and rescue her every time. And has to rescue her from her children, her 2 sons and 1 daughter. And one of the sons tries to marry her, and then so that he can inherit the earth. And the other son, played by Eddie Redmayne, he just wants to threaten her a lot. Kidnaps her human family and threatens to kill them if she doesn't hand over ownership of the earth. So you have this kind of like dynasty that rules the galaxy or the universe or whatever, and you have all these sort of different races, yet there's such a weird mix, and they never quite gel. They feel like they just grabbed things from different films and thrown them in there.
Mm-hmm.
So you have like the grey aliens that you would see from like alien abduction films, and then you've got characters that look like they're from Star Wars. I mean, especially the pilot that's an elephant, that's part human, part elephant, but then you don't really see him until the end. And you think, oh, that's an interesting character. Why have I not seen him before? You got Sean Bean, where, spoiler, doesn't die. There's a joke that every time Sharp survived, a Sean Bean character dies. Well, they must have caught up now, because in this one, Sean Bean's character doesn't die. And he's part B.
God, yeah, don't get me started. Yeah.
Yeah, I will get you started. I will. I hear that's what people love when you get going. And so, so you have these, I wouldn't say adventures, but a series of events that lead her back to where she starts, really. I mean, it just ends with her where she started, as somebody who's on they're cleaning toilets and, cleaning houses to, she may own the earth, but she's still doing it. She's still this sort of lowly old me. And all that she's learnt now is that, her life was good to start off with. A life of servitude was good, instead of being the owner of everything. So, yeah. So what did you think, Keith?
Okay, sorry, listeners. I'm not going to disagree with Simon on this one. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even bother rewatching it for this podcast. I only saw this, I didn't see it when it came out at the cinema. I only saw this late last year. Basically, I bought my good friend Alex. I bought him. He's really into sci-fi, so I bought him a few sci-fi Blu-rays for his birthday, and this was one of the titles amongst it, because I didn't really know much about it. I knew he hadn't seen it, so I bought it. And I remember one time I was around there, I think we were working on some pre-production for the film we made, and we took a break from it, and he said, oh, shall we watch a movie? And chose to put this on, and everybody knows how sort of forgiving I tend to be,
yes,
generally, but no, this was a mess. I mean, this was awful. I didn't have anything good to say about this, despite the fact that there's some good people involved. But I just felt it, nothing connected together at all. You had all these different designs and different things that didn't seem to gel. Tonally, it didn't seem to make sense either, because that was always sort of shifting, but not in a good way, like with Cloud Atlas, where it made sense for different segments of the story and time. This was just within the film. I didn't care about anyone in it at all, and obviously, I mean, Eddie Redmayne, who had that year won the Academy Award, and rightly so, for portraying Stephen Hawking in Theory of Everything. This was the next thing I saw him in, and oh my God, it was the hammiest, moustache twirling performance I've ever seen, and it was dreadful. To be honest, I probably should have watched it to give it, more of a critique on this, but because I found it very forgettable, so I don't remember a lot about it. The only things I remember was it was bad. None of it made any sense to me. I had real problems with the characters. Firstly, accepting stuff straight away. I mean, Mila Kunis's character, from a sort of everyday thing to find all of this, or everyday life to find all of this out. She kind of accepted everything pretty damn quickly, I thought, and none of it really made any sense. Nothing in it gelled together. I mean, there was some good design work on it. Some of the world building was pretty impressive. I know Michael Giacchino did the score for it, and I think, if memory serves, I know they usually use Don Davis, but they used him for this, and if memory served, the score was okay and stuff. But no, the story and the characters and just the whole thing just felt like a complete mess. And I was like, what a come down from the people that had made these, fantastic films like The Matrix and Bound and Cloud Atlas to this, frankly. I hadn't seen Speed Racer either, but I've heard people say that's also a terrible mess, but I hadn't actually seen that, so I couldn't really comment.
I remember when the trailers came out for it, and I thought, wow, it just looks so colourful, and it did look like a cartoon come to life, and so I did see that when it came out on DVD, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I can see why people don't like it, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
and also the fact that I'm a fan of V for Vendetta, which is another film that a lot of people don't like. But yeah, this one, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I wish I could say more about it, but I don't remember. The fact that it was that forgettable speaks volumes to me. I mean, Nowadays I watch so many movies that unless something absolutely moves me in some way, whether I think it's visually exciting or I love the characters or whatever, then I'll remember something. But this, other than remembering that Eddie Redmayne churns out a terrible performance, which is unlike him, I don't know anything. A bit of trivia, apparently. He obviously, the next film that he did was the Danish Girl, and apparently, obviously he plays a transgender character in that, and apparently he's always complimented that he got a lot of advice from Lana Wachowski on that, so which helped with his performance, etc. in that film, but obviously not in this one. So yeah, I don't know. I don't remember much about it. It was just, for me, it just didn't work on any level, and it was. I hate to say it was like a lot of, I'm worried I'm starting to sound like an old fart here now, but it's like a lot of movies lately that just seem to be all about visual spectacle, but at the cost of plot and character, and plot and character should come first and foremost, and obviously visuals are incredibly important in film, of course, but there's just so many things now that's just like a sort of explosion for your eyes with visuals, but nothing's sort of taxed together, and I feel personally emotionally removed from it straight away. So therefore, what is the point? Because the whole point of watching movies and is to escape and go on a journey and be emotionally satisfied.
Sort of taking that point, then I think what I would have liked to have seen is that journey taken from Jupiter Jones' point of view.
Yeah, because
what happens throughout the film is that we are shown events that are happening elsewhere, especially with Eddie Redmayne. Oh, this is such a bore. I mean, the thing is, so it should have just been with her all the time. So you're introduced to this world
through her
eyes, yeah, and not knowing any of these other events that are taking place. And this
exactly, it's structurally flawed from the start, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. It's just like a spectacle for spectacle's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, the bit where they're flying through, I think it's Chicago, where it's supposed to take place, or whatever American city it is, and they're doing massive destruction, and they're like, and then afterwards, when they're driving away, it's like, oh, won't anybody notice? And it's like, well, no, because they'll come in and repair the whole thing. And that should have been like a mind-blowing thing, but with seeing everything else that was going on, you're like, well, no, actually, whatever. It just made you go, and then it's never mentioned again.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So
it's just kind of,
yeah.
I mean, you said it earlier, and I agree entirely with you on this. The Wachowskis, when they do something good, it is really good. It's right up there. But when they don't, it is, there doesn't seem to be any middle ground with these guys. They're either really, really good or poor, and this falls into the poorest of the poor, I would say, by a long way. I mean, even more so than the Matrix sequels, and obviously we've already ragged on those big time. But this was very disappointing.
Disappointing from a point of view that if it had been better and it had made more money, then there would have been a chance that we would see more original material coming out of Hollywood instead of more superhero films or films that have a recognizable IP.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, now studios can turn around to somebody who have a similar idea for an epic space adventure and say, well, look, this film didn't do well and John Carter didn't do well, so why should we put the money into this? We talk about this a lot, about the fact that Hollywood doesn't want to take any risks, and with every kind of financial flop that happens, or bad storytelling, it's but then saying that, you have a film like Batman v Superman, which is also a mess, yet it made a lot of money.
But certainly on its opening weekend, yes.
So expect more of that, folks, because if everybody turns up to see it, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. But it's just a shame that with this was an original project that somebody like the Wachowskis could bring because of the success they had with the Matrix, and so it's going to get hard for people like them to get the money to make original stuff, let alone any other filmmaker. So it's just a shame that it was a mess. And I mean, and also I don't know what happened to make them delay the release, that they saw it and went, oh my god, this is terrible, we have to do reshoots, or was it the effects, or was it the studio turned around and said, well, we don't like this, I think we need this, this and this. So
yeah, who knows what interference.
I don't know.
I'm not too sure. Yeah. I mean, interestingly, looking at the Wachowskis have done what many filmmakers are now moving to. It seems that since then they've moved into, and I've not seen any of these, but they now have a television series that they produce called Sense8.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I'll be honest, I've not seen this, so I don't really know.
I've not seen either.
It's partly them and partly the guy that created Babylon 5, I believe, are the creators behind the show. But I don't know too much about it other than that. So they've moved into the realms of television. So
yeah, that's not what it's saying here. It's just it's got the Wachowskis as the creators
and
of it.
J. Michael Strick.
Oh, as writing, yeah. Okay, he's a writer on it.
Yeah,
but they've directed episodes as well as James McTeague and Tom Tykwer.
Mm-hmm. So they're using their other collaborators. But yeah, I don't know much about the show. I don't know what it is. I'm not sure what it's about.
Well, I know it's about a group of people that have the ability to connect to each other no matter where they are in the world and use whatever sort of abilities and stuff that they have. So
okay.
That's sort of what I know.
Bit of an ongoing theme.
Yeah, but I mean they've got actors from Cloud Atlas and also Jupiter Ascending in there as well. And I have to say, just going back to Jupiter Ascending, it was a shame to see some of the actors from Cloud Atlas in there being wasted.
Oh, well, like James Darcy and whatever, yeah.
yeah. And Duna Bay,
Yeah.
who was in such a kind of forgettable role, really.
Yeah. No, I agree. Particularly after, really, really good performances in Cloud Atlas. So
yeah,
but all in all, good on the Wachowskis. I mean, we call it movie heaven, movie hell. We have to, say the good with the bad, but
yes,
but I do consider them a competent pair of or a competent team of filmmakers, and in most cases, like their work. We hope there's more to come.
I'm sure there will be. Otherwise, it's a very dark world we live in if not even the Wachowskis can get films made.
Yes.
Anyway, I think that's a good place to end it. So we are going to finish on our customary manner, and that is to ask Keith, where can we find your work?
Okay, if you'd like to see some of the short independent films that I've made, you can go to YouTube and put in British Eyles. That's EYLES, as in my last name, and the films are there for you to watch.
And you can find my work, as always, at independentrunnings.com. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Mixcloud, and YouTube. And also we're on Player FM now.
Oh wow!
Seems we've been listed in the top podcasts for filmmaking, so you can listen to us there.
Wow!
Now.
Praise indeed. There you go.
Indeed. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. And please do leave us a review and a rating.
And check out some of those earlier episodes, folks.
Well, you've got a year's worth of episodes now to listen
Blimey.
to. So, just a bit of a heads up for next week's episode. As you may know, it's going to be Alien Day next week. The 26th of the 4th, or if you're American, the 4/26.
As in LV.
Yeah. So we're going to be joining in the celebrations, and we're going to be doing our Alien Day special. So please join us for that.
See you there.